What's up, podcast?
What up, though?
Chilling, chilling. What's the word?
Uh, I'm glad you're tackling this topic. It was so weird because I was just watching Roland Martin's take,
What was his
and
take?
oh, he needs to actually be the one over here having this debate with you, if we're being honest, right? Because he absolutely has um the wealth of information at his fingertips. I'm pretty sure he probably had some researchers dig up everything, all of the different aspects of what would represent racism in this country over the last few years. But I think from the conversation that you're having right now, I think I can do a good enough job discussing it with you based off the fact that, and I have the clip paused that where you actually acknowledge the fact that racism existed in the country. So
Hmm.
the only
Oh,
question
I'm
remains.
not saying that it didn't exist in the country,
Absolutely.
but I'm saying that the country itself. Listen,
Hmm.
everything exists in the country. I think murder exists in the country. Adultery exists in the country. I wouldn't
Hmm.
define itself. I wouldn't define the country itself as a murderous country because I don't think that that's the foundation of what it's supposed to represent. I don't think that that's what I'm saying is I believe that capitalism is the foundation behind why people were doing what they were doing. It doesn't mean
Hmm.
that it didn't result in egregious things happening. It doesn't mean that it was right. It doesn't mean that it made sense. It doesn't mean that it didn't transition into a resentment towards black people and vice versa. But the foundation of it and the reason why it happens, I think, is more of a representation of what the country is, which is a capitalistic country. Always has been, and probably always will be. But I don't think that that has anything to do with defining a country to be one thing. Otherwise, it's everything.
Hmm.
Every country is everything, if that's the case. Because to say a country is something is also to acknowledge that every country is everything, also, because you can't remove one thing without acknowledging all of it.
Yeah. So I can't see the time. Oh, Jesus. Do me a favor. Take me off camera for 1 second. Just one
All
second.
right.
Yeah, I just need to do one thing. Turn off the damn oven. I don't want to do it on camera.
No, you cool. I got you.
That's it. Prepping my food. Okay, I'm good.
You want to be back on?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. I agree with you that it looks better this way. Um, so here's the thing. The way my mind parlays this is the majority versus the minority.
Mhm.
Right. I've been this way for a very long time. So, when you use the murder example, right? I would absolutely agree with you that this isn't a murderous country. It's one of the arguments that I use about black people, specifically in Chicago, when people make content to try to demean Chicago. And I'm saying, well, listen, last year was about 530 murders
Mhm.
of black people. Let's just say they were all committed by black people, but it's over 800,000 black people in Chicago. So that means that less than 1%, way less than 1% of the black people in Chicago are murderous. Maybe we ought to put this in context when we're trying to demean the city, right? Or the black people we're in. So I understand the argument, but
Mhm.
it's also why I would say, and Nikki Haley actually provided me with this content because she says something that I've never heard anybody ever say before. She said America participated in slavery for 90 years.
Mhm.
So whenever you hear people talk, you usually hear 200 some years, right? Because they go all the way back to when the first slaves, quote unquote, arrived here, which I don't necessarily subscribe to
I,
that
I know
concept.
you probably watched the whole clip, but I'm gonna just take your word for it because I didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing of the context of what you referring to. But I got you. I'm feeling you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've always heard people talk about 200 plus years. You always people say for 400 years, you always hear these crazy numbers thrown out. But it's usually around the 200 some year mark because people talk about when the first slaves landed here, which again, I don't subscribe to that ideology of slaves being brought over here. But she said 90 years.
Hmm.
And so I'm sitting there thinking, like, why would she say 90 years? And then I did the math, right? When this is very slick, this is what people really do when they're taught very well how to communicate. Well, she's counting 1776. She's counting from 1776 when America was quote unquote actually established.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So she's not even counting what happened prior to that. She's saying America itself, after its establishment, participated in slavery for 90 years,
Hmm.
right? If we go with majority minority, then you would argue, well, man, if they only participated in it for 90 years, I mean, what does that tell you? Maybe they wasn't that bad, right?
Hmm.
Well, if I go with what Anton said just a few minutes ago, which I absolutely agree with, which is why I tell people all the time, don't even bring up slavery when you're trying to talk about what white people do. Anton said specifically that once the opportunity came for these quote unquote less than people to gain power or equal status, then there were people who pushed against that because they didn't see your purpose in this country being that originally.
Hmm.
And that's where the focus of racism came in at. So let's go with that. Slavery ends 1965. I would argue if somebody wants to say, well, when did racism against black people stop? I would argue it stopped in 2004 because that was the end of the crime bill, which we can say for sure was literally put in place to target black people, right? So if you go from 1865 to 2004, now you're looking at about 148 years. So
So
148
wait,
years.
let's stop there. You saying that racism ended, if you wanted to give it a number, in 2004? So you saying that racism doesn't exist against black people today as an institution or as a system or in any way, shape, or form?
No, absolutely. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I won't argue with people about it. So if they wanted to if you wanted a concession about when racism ended
Hmm.
against black people specifically, I would give you 2004
Okay.
just to move the conversation forward,
Yep, I got
right?
you.
Yeah, so you're looking at now from 1865 to 2004, you're talking about 148 years. So 148 of systemic racism against black people versus 90 years of slavery. I would argue then that makes America a racist country. Even if we say slavery was based on capitalism and not race. But according to Anton Daniels, what happened after that and the pressure and the pushback applied to black people was absolutely based on racism, right? So we're talking about 100
So you're
plus years of
wait,
that.
but that was so you're saying that racism in this country was still is or is still racist based off of that, based off of what you're just saying.
No, I wouldn't base it off of that. I would just say racism doesn't go away, right? If you're asking me if the country itself as a as an
What
entity
how do you define race?
racist,
How do
I
you
would
define
say no.
how do you define
Well,
race?
let me just make sure that lands. So to answer the question, if you ask me if the country as an entity
Mhm.
today is focused or rooted in racism, I would argue no.
How do you define racism? Because it's easy to look up the definition, but
Yeah.
how you apply it? Like in a similar way, it's almost like asking somebody how do they define a friend, right? We can look it up in in the dictionary, but the way that we look at it or how we apply it to our everyday lives based off of how we live, how do you define that? How do you define racism?
Racism for me is when you're intentionally impacting a specific demographic of people, when
Mhm.
you're specifically impeding their progress based on their race or your belief that your race is superior to theirs.
Would you say that we're racist towards people that are coming into this country right now?
Would I say we're racist towards them?
Hmm.
No.
Okay, so would black people be as against open borders and illegal immigration if it was more people from Nigeria, Somalia, instead of it being people from Venezuela and Mexico?
Absolutely.
Would be against it or for it or less against it?
They would absolutely be just as against it as they are now because we just
I
saw
don't.
that in Chicago.
I don't think so.
Well, we saw it in Chicago and we're seeing it right here in Kentucky.
Well, you seeing
Like,
it in Chicago because it is no. It's not. It's not really a face to it. They're just defining it as illegal immigrants or people seeking asylum. They're not necessarily attaching black people to it at all. As a matter of fact, they're more attaching Venezuelans to it than they are anybody from any country outside of that. However,
Mhm.
they're coming from everywhere.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. See, what you're when you're saying what we're seeing, that's what we're seeing in the media. But when you're actually here, feet on the ground on the pavement, oh, you see them all, and
Mm-hmm.
you know that they go from all shades, from the whitest of whitest to the darkest of darkest. We
Mm-hmm.
see the Somalians and all of the different African versions of these immigrants that are here, and you see also the different versions of the Hispanics. You see it. So that's what I'm saying. It's not like right now. It's not a look at it like, oh, these Mexicans. It's a look at it like, oh, these immigrants.
So, how would you define racism and what it looks like today in America?
Um, I think again, could it is it systemic? It's systemic in a way where it's localized, right? So what I mean is there was a concerted effort across the country to unionize certain jobs to give white people a monopoly on the trades. You're not gonna see that cross country anymore.
How?
I got a cousin that's an iron worker,
How
right?
did
So
they? How was it concentrated to where it was specifically targeted towards benefiting white people?
yeah, absolutely. That's why they was. That's why they were. Well, so based on my research and the people who I've read and watched before, which I can't cite off memory, of course, I'm 46, but the reason why those unions were made in the first place is because of the fact that the people who were slaves or quote unquote indentured servitudes and these type of people or the Chinese people, I forget exactly the term that they use for them, but these people were the labor force of the country. So now that slavery is over with, well, these people are way more qualified to get jobs done, which put a lot of white people on the outside of work and employment. And so what they
That is
did was
not
they
why the unions were created, though, Beans.
absolutely listen. Here's the thing. That's why I say I don't like to. What I don't like to do is I don't like to
But
sort.
it goes back to the original question, and this is the reason why I'm asking the question, because I think that I could argue the point more effectively if I ask questions, because I'm still
Mhm.
trying to understand what racism looks like based off of how you define it today. So
Absolutely.
I need an example. I need to be able to speak to an example, or we need a foundation as far as what this racism looks like, so we can tackle the subject more effectively.
Right. So, but you've asked me two different questions, right, within the last 3 minutes. So the last one that you asked me was about the unions, and that's what I was responding to, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so here's the thing about that. You and I, neither one of us, I'm older than you. Neither one of us were born,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're going to tell me what your source says about why the unions were formed, and I'm going to tell you what my source says about why the unions were formed, which is why we
But
don't have the
but
same.
but your argument was, well, these people are more qualified. So is it more qualification based off of cheaper labor? Because when I see unions, the foundation of a union is still the same as it is today, right? They
Mhm,
don't want foreigners, for example, coming in and
mhm,
doing the job much cheaper
mhm,
than what they think they should be able to be paid for it, because they feel like they are American citizens, right?
mhm,
So even that itself is rooted in the idea of capitalism.
mhm.
It's
Even
rooted
if I
it's
disagree to,
rooted in capitalism. It's not rooted in race. The race of
right.
the people that just so happen to be able to do the job quicker, faster, and cheaper just so happen to be the race of the people. But that has nothing to do with the race itself. It has everything to do with the benefit that comes along with me making more money, and I don't
Mhm,
want you doing it for cheaper. So if that be the case, is it still rooted in racism based off of how we look at Mexicans or how we look at people that can do the jobs cheaper? Because it's the same premise. It's the exact same premise. But that
mhm,
premise is not based off of the fact that they're Mexican, it's based off of the fact that they're going to displace me. And that's not racism, that's capitalism.
mhm.
That's capitalism.
So so the reason so the reason why that's it's still in play, right? The reason why is because at that time they weren't worried about the immigrants, they were worried about black people. They were
Based off
worried
of the
about
same premise, though.
absolutely, right?
So that's
I'm
capitalism. It
conceding
has nothing to do with race.
absolutely, but Anton Daniels said that when these people began to be given power and equalized, that's when people started, you see the force of racism. Anton
That's
Daniels said
not
it.
true. That's not
But
true.
you said it.
No, based off of that example that you're giving, that's not true. See, I'm not saying that racism never existed in the United States of America. I'm saying that when I give people an opportunity to substantiate their argument, and when they use an example to illustrate their point, it doesn't hit. It doesn't fall the way that they think that it falls, because again, it's still rooted. Listen, I see people don't want to be displaced by the very people that they will hire to make the money.
Absolutely.
So they'll give an opportunity to the very people that they don't want to be displaced by. Is that still racism? Or should they first also look for the people that they're more closely aligned with from a, race perspective, or whatever it is that their ethnicity is, but then they choose not to because that person is going to charge them more money?
Okay, I can see, but here's the thing, Anton. If you're going from slavery to employment, and you're that employment that you're getting is empowering you, equalizing you, and taking those opportunities away from
But that
those
has
very
nothing
white
to do with
people.
racism. The context of it is still based off of capitalistic nature. Has nothing to do with race whatsoever. The reason why see, you can feel a certain type of way about it because you may be the one that's impacted economically as far as not being empowered to do what you want to do. So it's always the person that's the victim that's going to feel some type of way about it because they're not looking at it the same way as the person that's giving the opportunities out. The person that's giving the opportunity out may see your race, but more importantly, they see their pocketbooks. And they're going to make the decision that's best for their pocketbooks more than they're going to make the decision based off of race. Because if it was purely based off of race, they would never hire you in the first place as cheap labor at all. You wouldn't even get the opportunity at all. You wouldn't even be having a conversation with these people at all. You wouldn't even get the chance to have a conversation to make no money from these people if it's based off of race. See, the only way that we can make this argument is to say that we're not economically empowered. And that's not an effective argument against the capitalistic nature of it. It's completely false because you only taking into consideration one view. You're not
The
taking into
problem,
consideration a view of the person that actually is still putting money in your pocket based off of how it can benefit them.
Anton, the problem is that the argument that you're making right now is absolutely focused on today when we're talking about back then, right? So that's what I'm saying. What was happening
Well,
back
you said that
then?
racism still exists.
Absolutely, but that's
So
what I'm
give me an
saying. We never.
example. So give me an example.
I was trying to answer
Okay, go
the
ahead.
yeah, I was trying to answer the union question, right? Which was to say that at this time when white men felt like they were being robbed of these opportunities, they got with business owners and they created these unions in order to empower themselves, in order to have these jobs that you can't have now unless you're in a union, right? All of the economical things that you're talking about absolutely applies. But I'm saying at that point, the people they were worried about weren't the immigrants; it was the blacks and the Mexicans and the Chinese, right? Who had been the labor force of the country for some time. When you come to today and you say, well, what does racism look like now? That's why I said I wouldn't even argue if somebody said the country isn't rooted or isn't the foundation of the country isn't racism at this point. Most people argue that it's classism now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which you can probably see that from your own point of view. But the fact of the matter is the racism that still exists is systematic locally, right? So it's not like that's, and that's why I was using the unions. The unions was across the country, right? So now there is no countrywide systematic
I don't
issue.
think that it's systematic. I think that the system is based off of classism. I don't think that has anything to do with racism.
Right, but that's the country. That's why I'm saying it's localized, right? So I can go somewhere specifically in maybe a smaller town or in a major city like Chicago, and I can see things that are specifically done to impact the progress of Black people. So that's what I'm saying. The
Like what?
country, the United States of America,
Like
may
what?
not
Give
be
me
a
an
racist
example.
anymore.
Give me an example.
Well, when you look at the Black community in Chicago, what do you see? You see police lights all over the place. You see cameras all over the place. You don't see that when you go into the other neighborhoods. And the
Absolutely,
crazy
you do.
part, you don't.
You do see cameras. There's cameras
I don't
everywhere.
know, but I'm saying you don't see it. You don't. It's not like how it is in the Black community where it's cameras on every other corner,
But
on
that's
every
not
major.
racism. That's a self-inflicted wound by people unable to police themselves and control themselves. And so you see a bunch of people. Look, everybody in the hood know who doing what. I would
Mhm.
say that I would say that we eat our own. How can you blame people? How can you blame another group of people for not policing you effectively? We know what's going on in our own neighborhoods. We know who killing who. We know who's selling the dope. We know who doing every. We know who on the streets. We know who pimping. We know who macking. We know who going to school. We know where we can go and get the pistols at. That's a self-inflicted wound. That has nothing to do with racism, systematic racism.
Well, so it absolutely does, but that's a conversation that's going to go too deep, right? Because now we have to talk about, well, now we have to talk about origins, right? See, and this is the thing that a lot of people don't like to do, right? So they like to say that black people wake up dysfunctional, right? They don't want to address any of the things that got you to where you are. They're just going to say, well, if you know that, fix yourself. Well, that's the problem, is that when you're seeing the people who are still impacted by what was done for those 148 years, that's what you're seeing. Now, if I look at Anton obviously not impacted by that. If I look at some of the more
I was
successful,
raised in the same hoods. I was raised in Detroit. There was the black.
absolutely,
Detroit is still the blackest city based off of population of any other city in the United States of America. It's been the blackest city for decades.
absolutely, but well, I could argue your upbringing still was different, but that's not even the point. The point is about impact, right? Some two people can see the same thing and it impact them differently. So it's not about whether or not you were there, it's about whether or not it impacted you.
I
That's the point.
disagree. I disagree. I think it's based off of our cultural norms. It's programming, based off of what we program ourselves to accept. That's why I say that black culture is trash, because black culture to me, culture is whatever it is that's the most significant that you champion and celebrate the most. It's the thing
You
that's
really believe
affected the
that?
most. And so as a result of as a result of our cultural norms, we've
Mhm.
normalized, even when we do have resources, to be trash. That's the reason why you see Young Thug and YSL in court today, because it has nothing to do with economic advantages or disadvantages or opportunities or anything like that. It has everything to do with whatever our cultural norm is. You give somebody some money, regardless of whether or not they have the opportunity, and that's the thing that we really not addressing. See, the beautiful thing is that in Detroit, we got two cities that sit inside of the city, right? You got this whole big old circle of Detroit, and then you got two little small cities that sit plotted in it inside of the city. One of them is Hamtramck, the other one is Highland Park. Hamtramck, both of them economically is not even remotely close to the median income average of Michigan, let alone the United States of America. However, if you drive through Hamtramck, it's not primarily made up of black people. It's made up of others, right? Chaldeans, so on and so forth, right? Different people from different cultures, whatever, right? And the houses are old, but they well taken care of. And the community is tight, and the streets are clean, and you have less crime, and they have a soccer team that's nationally recognized, which was one of the reasons why they even considered building a soccer stadium here in Detroit. And it's absolutely dope. I love going to Hamtramck because the culture is dope, and they don't have a lot of money, but they make sure to take care of their own. They police their own. They be on top of it, and it's not perfect, but it's great. It's great. You can feel the culture. You can feel it. It's absolutely dope. Now you go over to Highland Park, which is primarily black, and it's a completely different culture. And their cultural norms absolutely make it unlivable, because you can't even leave your car outside but without it being stolen and putting on bricks. And so my point is that even with economic opportunities, it still doesn't change the culture. I think the thing that we focused on the most, that the thing that we should focus on more, is changing what it is that we celebrate as a cultural norm, which would then incentivize people to do the thing that's in their best interest. We should be calling the police when somebody is trying to break into somebody else's car, instead of having this no snitching policy. We should be making sure that we raise our property taxes, not necessarily by waiting for somebody to gentrify it, but actually caring for the home and caring for your neighbors and actually protecting the things that surround us. I think that our cultural norms is trash, and that's the thing that we should be more focused on instead of being more focused on whether or not Nikki Haley actually want to acknowledge whether racism existed in the United States of America or not. We too focused on the wrong things, and we not focused on the things that actually will benefit us. Because whether she acknowledged it or not, that's not going to move the needle for people in general. It's not going to move the needle for culture. I just
So
got a different perspective. I think that we so distracted and it's so easy to get black people riled up about things that don't matter versus the things that actually is impacting you inside of your own neighborhoods and communities.
So I say this respectfully. What you said is a great talking point with a bunch of context that nobody can disagree with. And as far as the Nikki Haley thing goes, well, it's media. And I can guarantee you that the majority of black people, I would argue at least 80% of them, probably don't even know she said it. Right. But the fact of the matter is that when you look at the circumstances of what we're talking about, you're talking about a specific demographic of people who are being told that they have a cultural problem as if it's actually their culture. So we created the culture of guns and shooting and killing. We created the culture of drugs and destroying people with drugs. We created that. We created illegitimate children. We created that. Absolutely not. The culture
Absolutely,
that
we
people
have.
are referring to about black people is actually an American culture. It didn't start with us. And people just want to put it on black people because it's easier and they think it's easier for them to punch down on black
It doesn't matter where it started. It matters whether or not we adopted it and celebrated it. We made it cool. Other places don't make it cool to go and sip promethazine and lean. That wasn't given to us. That's something that we adopted. We made that cool. We went and finessed the drug companies. That was never cool. We made that cool. We rapped about it and we sold it. We sold it musically because
people. True.
music is programming to our children, and we made that a cultural norm. We
Absolutely,
made that cool.
but art imitates life.
No,
So people are just talking about what their real
bro,
life looks
no.
like.
Most of y'all, 98% of y'all would never know that that was real unless they heard it in a rap song. So you can't say art imitates life. That's an excuse for people to say things that they not gonna hold themselves responsible for. That's an excuse. Art doesn't imitate life. Art is an excuse for people to say that it is art so that they can sell it to the people and then get rich off of it as a result of it. Most of
Well,
us
that's
would
the
never know it.
argument.
No, bro. The way that most people learn what an ounce was, what a key is, what a pound is, how much to break it down for, what promethazine and lean is, Molly, all of that stuff. We heard that in the music that we sold to each other,
Absolutely.
and we celebrated it, and it sounded good to us, and that's our cultural norm. That's not something that was given to us. That's something that we celebrated.
Right. So what about all of the movies that predated hip hop music that did the same thing?
Like what?
Highlighted it. The Scarface predates hip hop music.
That had nothing to do with black people. That
Absolutely.
was that Scar.
Hold on.
Listen, Al Pacino wasn't even black. I don't even know if it was a black person in that movie.
Wait, hear me out.
We the
This is
ones
what
that made it cool though.
hear me out though, Anton. Think about what I'm saying. If you're gonna argue that, if you're gonna argue about hip hop, and I know you think you know about hip hop, we're gonna have to debate on this
Oh, I
one.
know about hip hop.
Okay, then. So, how many rappers have quoted,
Wait.
took their name from,
Okay.
right? Movie lines and scenes and everything. Use the clips on their albums as the inserts in the in betweens in their tracks of those very movies that we're talking about. Scarface, Goodfellas, Godfather, all of that stuff for decades.
Not a black person in any of those movies.
Not a black person in any of those movies, right?
So how
But
are
they
we the
were
ones that's always the most impacted when we don't even have any representation in the things that we celebrate?
Wait, but before we move forward, would you say that that media itself was specifically designed to highlight, propagate, promote that lifestyle? Or were they
To
just making
who?
movies?
To
I'm
who?
just saying, or were they just making movies?
No, why do we always adopt the thing that's the worst for us and we ain't even got no representation in it? That's why I'm saying it's not systematic because that wasn't even for you. Nobody in the black community should have been taking on the names, personas, and celebrating Scarface, Casino, Goodfellas, all of this stuff. Nobody. But we took it, made it ours, celebrated it, And now we made it our cultural norm when it never was for us in the first place. But then we'll make an excuse and say, well, it's systematic towards what?
No, but the question is whether or not it was created to promote it, right? Because
No, no,
then
no.
you
Let's stick to black people. Keep it on black
absolutely,
people.
that's my point. Because if you're going to argue that rappers made the music to promote the lifestyle, to say go do this, then you have to also argue that those movies were made to promote it, and therefore it makes absolute sense that these people would indoctrinate that rhetoric from those movies into their lives,
Then
because
how
it
come
was made to
wait,
do
why did
exactly
it
that.
why did it not impact any other communities as much as it impacted what it is that we adopted?
I can't say that it
Everybody
didn't.
had access to see it.
Yeah, but I can't say that it didn't. It's the same reason why how we
Come on,
know.
Beans, you being disingenuous now.
Really? Who do you think
Yes.
sold more cocaine in this country? White people
I
or
no, no,
black
no,
people?
no. I don't see no white people walking around talking about I'm Scarface. They didn't name themselves Scarface.
No,
They
they
didn't
walk
name
around.
themselves after an immigrant that came over here. None of that. I don't see
Right.
no other culture celebrating that.
No, they go around celebrating our country, our culture. They go around celebrating
Oh,
us. They call
Beans.
themselves the us. It's hold on. So we
Oh,
finna pretend like that's not the case. Do I
oh,
gotta go to Tom Cruise
that's
doing
crazy.
Young Jock on TV?
That's crazy, Beans. I can't believe that
We
you're standing on.
imitate them, they imitate us. But
I
everybody,
can't
all
believe it.
everybody want to point out is that we imitated them.
That's
Do
crazy.
you know what the word wigger is? You know where that comes from?
Yep.
It's the reason why that word exists, Todd.
But they don't even like white people. Don't even like them. They shun white people that are trying to be like black people that is wiggers.
Absolutely. And we
So
do the
their
same thing,
cultural
right?
norm, no, 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 no. Their cultural norm is to shun the thing that they don't like about what it is that somebody else is trying to be that's not them. How come we didn't shun what was happening over in Scarface, but we named ourselves after it and we modeled our entire lives based off of it?
No, I agree with you, but but we do shun black people who try to act white, and we also shun white people who try to act black. That's where the term "wigger" came from.
But
So
the
that's what
problem is that what it is that we
I'm
think that
talking
they,
about. The best versions of us
but you
too, not
missing
like
it,
what's
Beans.
good.
The very thing that they're trying to act like is trash. We
Absolutely, but it
we're,
was,
we're
but they could
gatekeeping.
see it.
No, no, no. We're gatekeeping the worst thing for us from somebody and thinking that it's cool because they trying to be like it. No, you can't be like us. But
Right.
we shouldn't even want to be like that.
Absolutely,
So
I
why are
agree
we
with you.
gatekeeping something that's trash?
Because it was financial. It's
Oh
capitalism.
God.
Y'all want to blame. Y'all want to give capitalism credit for everything except for what niggas do.
So
It
so
was
so
really
now
involved.
wait. So when I stood on it and I said it was all based off of capitalism in the first place, it wasn't. It was rooted in racism. Now that
No,
we want to
we
make
can't
an
say that.
excuse for no, it's circular. It came full circle. So now that we want to make an excuse for the very behavior that we don't want to take accountability for, now it's capitalism.
No, Anton, this might listen respectfully. I love you, brother, but this ain't gonna work on me. I listen very
It
well.
worked. You just made my
No,
argument.
I listen very well. You were specifically talking about the slavery era. I conceded that that's all about capitalism. But you yourself said, and I quoted, and I'm going to use in my video when I review it, that after slavery, when black people began to be empowered and equalized, was when racism started rearing its ugly face, which is why I don't understand why you gave me the pushback on the
Beans,
youth
Beans, you just made my argument all the way back to the beginning of this conversation.
about slavery.
Literally.
I conceded that when I came on.
Oh my God.
I told you 90 years of slavery, 148 years of racism. I'll give you that. Slavery, capitalism. Everything else, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, KKK, civil rights, Vietnam War, feminism, welfare, crack cocaine, 94 crime bill. All of that was specific racism to attack black people. It lasted way longer than
It
slavery did.
wasn't.
And
It wasn't.
therefore, this
Even if
country
you
is
want to talk about the crime bill, even if you want to talk about crack cocaine, all of that was rooted in capitalism. 100%. 100%.
you know
Even
what?
if you want to talk about the prison
See,
system, the prison industrial complex, it's rooted in capitalism.
all of it is.
So you making my point.
But wait, and okay, I can see. But if I can see, you can't talk shit about drug dealers and gangbangers no more because
I
it's rooted in
can. They don't make it right. Listen,
it's rooted in
I don't agree with all capitalism. I don't
right.
agree with all capitalism. I agree with capitalism, the premise of it, but it's ways in which you're supposed to conduct yourself. And all capitalism is not good capitalism. But the
Yeah,
fact of the matter is that most things is rooted in the love of money,
absolutely,
which is why it
absolutely,
becomes bad, because money no longer becomes a tool. It becomes a vice for evil, and it becomes something that you'll do anything for, including some of the worst atrocities that we then put labels on, but we won't go to the root cause of why people started to do it in the first place. Listen,
absolutely.
if it was
Thank
no
you for
money to
saying
be
that.
made, if it was no money to be made in crack cocaine, it would have never touched our shores.
Facts, facts, absolutely. So what you're basically saying is that, in your opinion, you believe racism is a byproduct.
Correct.
I
I
have to
believe that
argue.
a lot of the things that we see happening today is a byproduct.
So capitalism is the root of all evil.
It's
Thank
not.
you.
The love of money is the root
Just
of
say
it.
it out loud.
It's
Sorry.
not capitalism. Capitalism isn't bad. It's the love of money is the root of all evil.
Yeah,
There's
that's
nothing wrong with profiting. The problem is, are you profiting from good or are you profiting from evil? Because people that profit from evil will do anything for it, which includes racism, which includes killing people, which includes taking people's lives, which includes selling people a product that they know is bad for them, right? But there's
absolutely.
nothing wrong with being fairly compensated or being compensated for the value that you add in society. But when it becomes toxic and you continue to do it, that's when it becomes a love and it becomes your God, which is the love of all money.
That was absolutely beautifully well put, dog. Hey man, listen, I enjoyed this back and
Yeah,
forth. I
this
don't
is
know if
dope.
other people, man, but this was
I
dope, dog.
always have a lot of respect for your perspective, your mindset, how you think. I think that you're a really good content creator, and I think that you have a lot of talent. I have a lot of respect for your intellect beings, and I rock with you, bro. I appreciate you, bro.
I appreciate you. Thank you, man. And I'm glad you did this tonight. Because like I said, it to me, I liked what Roland did, but I
I
think
gotta check it out. I gotta see what he said.
yeah, he I like what he did. He put up a lot of stuff, but it's like you're not going into the ad hominems.
Hmm.
And I think that's what to me kind of like make it go, right? So man, respect
No,
to you, brother.
I think that um I like having conversations because I learned something from people about different ways to look at stuff that I would have never thought about it. Um,
Hmm.
and that's why I'm cool with people that disagree with me, because I think that I get a lot from it, and I see where I'm flawed, even when it comes to some of the ways in which I may debate or argue something, or even in something that I never considered. So that's why I value people like you so much, because you bring up things that I probably wouldn't have considered, or I probably wouldn't have looked at the way that I look at it.
Yeah.
But it gives me a more well-rounded view, and it gives me more context so that I can take that and I'm gonna probably sit on that and learn on some of that. You know what I'm saying?
Well, we should absolutely be here for each other in that way, man. And so, it's a few people I got to reach out to and make things right because I think the content would be better. You
Yeah,
know what I'm saying? If we just collectively come together and build the way you just said it. I think
yeah.
that's the way to build. And so, yeah, I've been on my dean, but I'm getting back to it.
All
Let me
right.
go ahead and eat though. Salute to you, bro.
I appreciate you, Beans.
No doubt.